Welcome to Mystery Chronicles, where we dive deep into some of the most intriguing and mysterious stories from around the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe. The year is 1888. The place, London, England, the heart of the Victorian era. A spectre was haunting the East End, a shadowy figure who would forever be known as Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a killer, he was a phantom, a nightmare, come to life in the Gaslight and Shadows. His reign of terror, though brief, would leave an indelible mark on the world, shaping criminal investigation and capturing imaginations for over a century. Imagine, if you will, the bustling streets of Whitechapel, teeming with life, yet shrouded in a perpetual haze of coal smoke. Gaslights flickered, casting an eerie glow on the faces of passers-by, their footsteps echoing in the damp night air. Life in Victorian London, particularly in impoverished districts like Whitechapel, was a struggle for survival. Women, many forced into prostitution to survive, walked the streets at night, their lives as precarious as the flickering gaslights that illuminated their path. His victims, all women, became symbols of the era's dark underbelly, their lives tragically cut short, their stories lost in the annals of time. Fear permeated the air, as palpable as the fog that clung to the cobblestone streets. Jack the Ripper's reign of terror was mercifully short, lasting just a few months in the autumn of terror that was 1888. Despite a massive manhunt by Scotland Yard, the most advanced police force of its time, Jack the Ripper was never caught. The lack of a definitive answer to the question, who was Jack the Ripper, has fueled endless speculation, turning the case into a macabre puzzle that has captivated amateur sleuths and professional investigators alike. Over the decades, countless theories have been proposed, implicating everyone from impoverished immigrants to members of the royal family. Even today, over a century later, the name Jack the Ripper still evokes a sense of morbid curiosity. London in the late 1800s was a city shrouded in contradictions, a place where unprecedented progress collided with grinding poverty. Whitechapel, the epicenter of the Jack the Ripper murders, was a stark illustration of this disparity. Here, life was a relentless struggle for survival, a daily battle against overcrowding, disease, and despair. The fog, a constant presence in Victorian London, seemed to embody the city's duality. It could be beautiful, lending an ethereal quality to the gaslit streets, but it also concealed a darker side. Jack the Ripper, the unknown predator stalking the streets of Whitechapel, became synonymous with the fog itself, a shadowy, elusive figure striking fear into the hearts of Londoners. The Victorian era, often romanticized for its elegance and refinement, was also a time of immense social upheaval. The rapid industrialization of England had drawn millions of people from rural areas to cities like London in search of work. Whitechapel, like other slums across London, became a breeding ground for poverty, disease, and crime. For many women in Whitechapel, the only escape from this grinding poverty was prostitution. With few employment opportunities available to them, they turned to selling their bodies on the streets, their lives a desperate cycle of exploitation and danger. The Ripper's crimes exposed the dark underbelly of Victorian society, forcing Londoners to confront the harsh realities of life in the East End. As darkness descended upon Whitechapel, the gaslights flickered to life, casting an eerie, yellowish glow upon the cobbled streets. The gaslights, a symbol of Victorian progress, could not fully penetrate the darkness that clung to the East End. The streets of Whitechapel were a sensory overload, a cacophony of noise, smells, and sights. Amidst this chaotic backdrop, women walked the streets, their faces illuminated by the pale gaslight. Some were returning home from long hours of work in factories or sweatshops. It was in this environment where darkness and light existed in uneasy tension that Jack the Ripper operated. Victorian London was a city of stark contrasts, where unimaginable wealth and abject poverty existed side by side. The West End, with its grand avenues, opulent theaters, and elegant townhouses, stood in stark contrast to the squalor of the East End. For the wealthy elite, life in Victorian London was one of privilege and leisure. The Jack the Ripper murders, however, forced Londoners of all social classes to confront the harsh realities of the city's underbelly. The murders shattered the illusion of a society governed by order and progress, revealing the dark undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface of Victorian respectability. In Whitechapel, poverty was not just an abstract concept. It was a lived reality that permeated every aspect of life. Families struggled to survive on meager wages, often relying on charity, or in some cases, crime to make ends meet. The pressure of poverty weighed heavily on the residents of Whitechapel, crushing their spirits and eroding their hope. For women, the burden of poverty was particularly heavy. The women who became Jack the Ripper's victims were, in many ways, casualties of this cycle of poverty and desperation. The waning summer of 1888 in London was a time of both excitement and trepidation. The first whispers of fear began with the discovery of Mary Ann Nichols' body on August 31st, 1888. Nichols, a woman known to frequent the pubs and lodging houses of Whitechapel, was found lifeless in Bucks Row, her throat brutally slashed, her body bearing the unmistakable signs of a frenzied attack. The brutality of the murder sent shockwaves through Whitechapel. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare. News of Nichols' murder spread through Whitechapel like wildfire. Sick custody carried on the lips of gossiping neighbors and splashed across the front pages of the city's newspapers. Just 1 week after Nichols' demise, the East End was shaken by another gruesome discovery. Annie Chapman, another woman trapped in the desperate cycle of poverty and prostitution, was found murdered on the morning of September 8th in the backyard of a Hanbury Street tenement. Her throat, like Nichols's, had been savagely cut, and her abdomen was mutilated in a manner that spoke of a chilling familiarity. With 2 brutal murders in as many weeks, panic seized Whitechapel. Theories ran rampant through the pubs and lodging houses of Whitechapel. As September drew to a close, the fog that had become synonymous with London in autumn descended upon Whitechapel, thickening the air of dread that hung over the district. On September 30th, the fog bore witness to a night of unspeakable horror. Within hours of each other, 2 more women, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, were murdered in separate but equally brutal attacks. Stride's body, discovered in Dutfield's yard, bore a slash across her throat, but the killer had been interrupted before he could inflict the full extent of his gruesome ritual. Eddowes, however, was not so fortunate. The double murder sent a collective shudder through London. As the body count rose, a chilling pattern emerged from the fog of fear and speculation. Jack the Ripper's victims were all women, all living on the margins of society, trapped in the desperate cycle of poverty and prostitution that plagued Whitechapel. The attacks typically occurred in the early hours of the morning, under the cover of darkness or the concealing fog. The victims' throats were slashed with a swift, deep cut, suggesting a blade wielded with chilling expertise. The Ripper's ability to evade capture, coupled with the brutality of his crimes, created a climate of fear unlike anything London had ever seen. While the exact number of Jack the Ripper's victims remains debated, 5 murders between August and November 1888 are considered the Canonical Five, linked by their brutality and the killer's modus operandi. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Their names etched in criminal history, linked by their tragic fate and the chilling mystery of their deaths. These women became symbols of a city gripped by fear, their lives extinguished in a whirlwind of violence. The murder of Mary Jane Kelly marked a turning point, as the killings abruptly stopped, leaving scars on Whitechapel and Victorian London. The streets of Whitechapel buzzed with nervous energy. News of Mary Ann Nichols' murder spread like wildfire, igniting fear and speculation. The police, now thrust into a labyrinth of investigation, hunted a killer who vanished into thin air. Scotland Yard assigned its best detectives, determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. Inspector Frederick Aberline, a seasoned investigator, took the helm. The investigation began in the heart of Whitechapel. Detectives interviewed anyone who might have seen or heard something suspicious. They questioned prostitutes, shopkeepers, and street vendors. The police, accustomed to petty theft, faced a brutality that defied explanation. The killer moved with chilling precision, his crimes marked by calculated cruelty. As the fog rolled in from the Thames, blanketing Whitechapel in its damp embrace, the investigation seemed to hit a wall. Witnesses, their memories clouded by fear or alcohol, provided conflicting accounts of the night of Nichols' murder. Clues, when they surfaced, proved as elusive as the fog itself, leading the police down blind alleys and dead ends. The fog, a constant presence in Victorian London, became both a blessing and a curse for the investigators. It provided cover for the killer, allowing him to move unseen through the labyrinthine streets, but it also obscured potential evidence, washing away footprints and muffling cries for help. The police, accustomed to relying on eyewitness accounts and physical evidence, found themselves grappling with a case that seemed to defy their traditional methods. The killer, a phantom in the fog, left behind no trace, no calling card, save for the brutalized bodies of his victims. The newspapers, eager to capitalize on the public's growing fascination with the case, published sensationalized accounts of the murders, often embellishing details and speculating wildly about the killer's motives and identity. The public, bombarded with conflicting information, grew increasingly impatient with the police's inability to apprehend the culprit. Amidst the frustration and fear that gripped Whitechapel, glimmers of hope emerged from the fog of uncertainty. Witnesses, emboldened by the reward offered for information leading to the killer's capture, came forward with accounts, some more credible than others, of a man seen lurking near the crime scenes. One witness, a Polish immigrant named Joseph Lewenda, claimed to have seen a man talking to Catherine Eddowes just minutes before her murder. Lewenda's description of the man, while vague, matched the profile of a suspect the police had been building based on other eyewitness accounts. Another witness, a woman named Elizabeth Long, reported seeing a man matching the suspect's description, arguing with a woman she believed to be Mary Jane Kelly on the night of her murder. Long's testimony, while compelling, was clouded by the fact that she had been drinking heavily that night. The police, desperate for a breakthrough, clung to these threads of evidence, hoping they would lead them to the killer's lair. They traced the movements of known criminals, searched lodging houses, and followed up on every lead, no matter how tenuous. Yet, the killer, a master of disguise and deception, remained one step ahead, his motives as impenetrable as the fog that shrouded Whitechapel. The Jack the Ripper case exposed the limitations of forensic science in the late 19th century. Fingerprinting, a technology that would revolutionize criminal investigation in the decades to come, was still in its infancy. DNA analysis, a cornerstone of modern forensic science, was unheard of. The police, lacking the sophisticated tools of their modern counterparts, relied on eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and their own intuition to solve crimes. They collected fingerprints, but their ability to match them to potential suspects was limited. They examined footprints and tire tracks, but these often proved inconclusive, especially in the muddy, crowded streets of Whitechapel. The Ripper, seemingly aware of the limitations of forensic science, exploited these to his advantage. He left behind few clues, and those he did leave were often contaminated or misleading. He seemed to vanish into thin air after each murder, leaving behind trail of blood and terror, but no trace of his true identity. The police, frustrated by their inability to track down the killer, turned to other methods, some more unorthodox than others. They consulted with psychics and astrologers, hoping to gain insights into the killer's mind. They even resorted to using bloodhounds, but the dogs, overwhelmed by the myriad scents of the city, proved largely ineffective. As the weeks turned into months and the killer remained at large, the pressure on Scotland Yard mounted. The public, bombarded with sensationalized headlines, demanded answers. The police, under intense scrutiny, found their every move dissected and debated. The Jack the Ripper case captured the public's imagination like no crime before it. Newspapers published daily updates, often criticizing the police's perceived incompetence. The police faced a dilemma. They needed to maintain public order while conducting a thorough investigation. They released information strategically, hoping to quell public unrest. The pressure on the police was immense. The Jack the Ripper case had become a referendum on law enforcement's effectiveness. The fog that shrouded Whitechapel cast a shadow of doubt over the entire city. The fog that hung over Whitechapel seemed to breed suspicion. Every inhabitant, from laborer to merchant, became a suspect. The police, inundated with tips, chased shadows. The press exaggerated claims, fueling paranoia. Neighbors viewed each other with distrust. The Ripper poisoned the fabric of the community. Whispers of conspiracy circulated through Whitechapel's pubs and lodging houses. The brutality of the crimes led many to believe Jack the Ripper was part of a larger organization. Some whispered the killer was a Freemason, influencing the police and courts. Others blamed Jewish communities, feeding into existing prejudices. The police investigated every rumor, no matter how far-fetched. They infiltrated societies, interviewed leaders, and followed countless leads. The truth was buried beneath speculation and fabrication. The Ripper remained an enigma, his motives elusive. Was he a madman driven by bloodlust, or a skilled surgeon with chilling precision, or something far more sinister, a creature of imagination? One of the most controversial theories about Jack the Ripper is the royal connection. This theory suggests the killer was linked to the British royal family. Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson, is often named. He had health issues and was rumored to engage in scandalous behavior. Though lacking evidence, the theory persists due to its sensational nature. It taps into a fascination with the dark side of power and privilege. The brutality of the Ripper's crimes led many to believe he was a madman driven by bloodlust. This theory attempts to explain the inexplicable through mental illness. The Victorian era had a limited understanding of mental illness. Insanity was often seen as a moral failing or demonic possession. Those with severe mental illnesses were confined to asylums. The Madman Theory fails to account for the calculated nature of the Ripper's crimes. The precision and control suggest premeditation, not a raving lunatic. The Ripper may have had mental illness, but it doesn't explain the complexity of his crimes. The human mind, even when diseased, is capable of great cunning. More than a century after the last victim of Jack the Ripper was laid to rest, the identity of the killer remains one of the most enduring mysteries in criminal history. Countless books, documentaries, and amateur investigations have attempted to unmask the killer, but the fog of time and limitations of Victorian era forensic science have made it nearly impossible to solve the case. The lack of a definitive answer has only served to fuel speculation, turning the Jack the Ripper case into a macabre puzzle that continues to fascinate and frustrate. Theories abound, ranging from the plausible to the outlandish, each offering its own interpretation of the scant evidence available. Was Jack the Ripper a butcher? His knowledge of anatomy evident in the precise mutilations? Was he a doctor? His access to surgical instruments and his understanding of the human body giving him the means and the knowledge to commit such gruesome acts? Or was he something far more sinister? A creature that defied categorization? A manifestation of the darkest impulses of the human heart? The truth, lost amidst the swirling fog of time and speculation, may never be known. But the legend of Jack the Ripper endures, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of civilization, a testament to the enduring power of mystery. The Autumn of Terror that was 1888 left an indelible stain on Whitechapel, a scar etched not just on the cobblestone streets, but also on the collective psyche of its inhabitants. The fog that had once been a familiar, if unwelcome, companion now carried the chilling memory of unseen terror, a constant reminder that darkness could conceal unspeakable horrors. The murders, so brazen, so brutal, shattered the fragile sense of security that had existed within the community. Neighbors, once accustomed to sharing meager meals and offering solace in times of hardship, now eyed each other with suspicion, their trust eroded by the knowledge that a monster had walked among them. The women of Whitechapel, particularly those who made their living on the streets, were acutely aware of their vulnerability. The Ripper's reign of terror had exposed the precarious nature of their existence, their lives deemed disposable by a society that often turned a blind eye to their plight. The police, despite their best efforts, had failed to apprehend the killer, leaving a void of justice that gnawed at the soul of Whitechapel. The Ripper, it seemed, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of fear that would linger for generations to come. News of the Whitechapel murders spread far beyond the confines of London's East End, carried on the wings of a scandalized press, eager to capitalize on the public's morbid fascination with the case. The name Jack the Ripper became synonymous with a particular brand of horror. A chilling reminder that even in the heart of civilization, darkness could triumph. The Ripper's crimes, so brutal, so seemingly motiveless, captured the imagination of a public both horrified and strangely captivated by the mystery. Theories abounded, each more outlandish than the last, as amateur sleuths and armchair detectives attempted to solve the puzzle that had stumped Scotland Yard. The case, with its mix of gruesome violence, tantalizing clues, and an enduring mystery of the killer's identity, became a macabre source of entertainment, spawning books, plays, and even songs that romanticized the Ripper and his crimes. The East End, once a place of poverty and hardship, became a macabre tourist destination. Its dark history a source of both revulsion and fascination. The Ripper's shadow, it seemed, extended far beyond the graves of his victims, his legend woven into the fabric of popular culture, a chilling reminder of the enduring power of fear and the allure of the unsolved. The Jack the Ripper case had a profound impact on criminal investigation and forensic science. It highlighted the limitations of 19th century policing, leading to new investigative techniques. The Ripper's evasion led to undercover officers, criminal profiling, and systematic crime scene analysis. Public cooperation became crucial, leading to reward systems and anonymous tip lines. The crimes forced society to confront the plight of the poor and marginalized. It sparked debate about social reform, poverty, and women's rights. The Ripper's legacy extends beyond criminal justice and social reform. The case has inspired countless books, films, TV shows, and video games. The Ripper's story continues to resonate, tapping into our primal fears and fascination with the macabre. The cobblestone streets of Whitechapel, once slick with the blood of Jack the Ripper's victims, have long since been paved over. The gaslight replaced by the harsh glare of electricity. Yet, the memory of that autumn of terror lingers. Despite over a century of investigation, the question remains unanswered. Who was Jack the Ripper? Was he a skilled surgeon or a madman driven by bloodlust? The lack of a definitive answer fuels endless speculation. The story of Jack the Ripper transcends a simple, unsolved murder case. It has become a cultural phenomenon, a dark fairy tale in our collective imagination. From crime novels to the silver screen, from graphic novels to video games, Jack the Ripper has been resurrected countless times, his legend growing with each retelling. He symbolizes the darkness beneath civilization, a reminder that even in enlightened times, evil can flourish. The Ripper's appeal lies in our fascination with the macabre, our desire to confront inner darkness. He represents the unknown, a reminder that some questions remain unanswered, some doors best left unopened. Jack the Ripper's story is not just about the 5 women nor the hunt for a killer who vanished into legend. It is about the limits of knowledge, the persistence of fear, and the enduring power of mystery. A story that continues to fascinate, horrify, and remind us that some shadows never fully disappear.